Good day to you all. In this story, we'll be discussing the 6th to 10th chapter of Volume 1 of What If Maple Was Reincarnated in a Corrupted Fantasy World? This story was written by Ivan-2025, published in Story Approved in Wattpad. I hope you enjoy it. Now, let's begin. Ked woke up with a stretch, the morning sunlight streaming through the window and warming her face. She rubbed her eyes and yawned, her body still feeling a little stiff from the long journey in the unfamiliar bed. She sat up, half asleep, and then swung her legs over the side of the bed. She stood up and walked out of the room. The other members of the Lion Fang party were already up, the kitchen filled with the sounds of sizzling bacon and the aroma of brewing coffee. Ryan was sitting at the table, his mug of coffee steaming in front of him. Lyra was busy at the stove, frying bacon and eggs, her movements efficient and practiced. Alara was sitting at the table, her head resting on her arms, as if she was about to doze off. Ryan looked up from his coffee mug and saw Ked standing in the doorway, her hair tousled and her eyes still half closed. "Good morning, Maple," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "Did you sleep well, kid?" "Yeah, I did," Ked said, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Thank you for letting me stay the night, Ryan-san, Alara-san, and Lyra-san." "No problem, kid," Ryan said. "By the way, do you have any plans for today?" Ked thought for a moment. "I don't think I have any plans. I guess I'll just follow you guys. I was interested in learning more about this whole Slayer thing, anyway," she said, her voice filled with curiosity. Ryan nodded. "All right, then, but can you fight? You have that shield and sword with you." "I'm just asking, you know, in case we need to defend ourselves." Ked gave a confident grin. "Yeah, I can fight. Don't worry, I can protect myself." "I see," Ryan said, a thoughtful look on his face. "Just making sure. There are a lot of strong monsters in the forest. I just wanted to make sure." He didn't get to finish his sentence. Lyra, who had been quietly listening to their conversation, suddenly punched him in the back, hard enough to send his head slamming onto the table. "Ow, that hurts," Ryan yelped, rubbing his head. Lyra sighed, a playful smile on her face. "Don't listen to him, Maple. There are only low-level monsters in this area. This idiot is just trying to look cool." "Is that so?" Ked asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "But even if there were high-ranking monsters, I wouldn't mind coming with you guys." Ryan chuckled. "Well, you're certainly brave," he said. "But don't worry, we'll make sure you're safe. We'll protect you." After a while, Torin and Reese woke up, their eyes still a little blurry from sleep. They joined the others for breakfast, and then the 5 of them left the house and headed into the forest. It was time for their daily patrol. "I'm glad you're joining us, Maple," Reese said, as they walked along the forest path. "It's nice to have some company." "Yeah, it's always better to have more hands on deck," Torin agreed. They walked for a while, enjoying the cool morning air and the sounds of the forest. Suddenly, they heard a rustle in the bushes. They stopped and drew their weapons, their senses alert. A group of goblins emerged from the bushes, their eyes narrowed with malice. They were small and green, with sharp teeth and pointy ears. Ryan, Torin, and Reese quickly dispatched them, their movements swift and deadly. As they were cleaning up the mess, Lyra pulled out a pouch and sliced off the right ears of the goblins. Alara then burned the bodies with a flick of her wrist, leaving nothing but ashes behind. Ked watched carefully, observing the process. She had seen this happen in the anime and manga she used to read. The ears were probably used as proof, a way to show that they had killed the monsters. She imagined that they would probably sell them to a guild or the Slayer's base, or whatever they called it in this world. They continued their patrol, walking through the forest, their eyes scanning the underbrush for any sign of trouble. They encountered a few groups of goblins, but they were easily dispatched. The goblins were small and weak, no match for the skilled slayers of the Lion Fang party. After a while, they came to a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing, suspended from a thick web woven between 2 towering trees, was a monstrous creature. It was a demon spider, the most powerful monster in the forest. It was AC rank monster, rarely seen, and incredibly dangerous. AC rank monster was typically stronger than AC rank human. Monsters had a natural advantage, and it usually took 2B rank slayers to take down AC rank monster. But the Lion Fang party was not your average party. They had Ryan, an A rank slayer. And Torin and Reese were both skilled B rank slayers. Lyra and Alara were C rank slayers, but they were incredibly strong for their rank. They had joined the party late, but they had quickly proven themselves. Ryan gave a nod, his eyes locked on the demon spider. "Let's show this thing what we're made of," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. Ryan charged forward, his sword gleaming in the sunlight. Torin and Rhys followed close behind, their weapons drawn. Lyra, standing back a little, took aim with her bow. Her arrows flew through the air, striking the demon spider with deadly accuracy. Alara, with a whispered chant, conjured a stream of magic, a boost of power that flowed to Torin and Rhys, strengthening their attacks. Ryan didn't need any boost. He was too strong, too skilled, and needed any help from magic. Ked watched the battle unfold, her hands clenched. She could easily defeat this monster herself, and she had encountered demon spiders before, even fought a few. She had even faced an adult demon spider, a creature as tall as a 4-story building. This one was only as tall as a 2-story building. She knew that demon spiders in their adult state were powerful creatures. It has B-rank physical strength in monster standard. Of course, she had no idea about monster rankings. She only knew how strong certain monsters were based on her own experiences. An adult demon spider was no stronger than the machine lord she had fought in the game, and she could easily defeat that monster. The only reason why an adult demon spider was still considered to be in the peck of C-rank monster, even though its strength was comparable to B-rank monsters, was because of its speed and ability. It was slow and weak. Its webs were annoying, but they were easily cut with a sword or spear. The only thing about the demon spider that was fast was its swinging speed. But even that was slow and predictable, and most C-rank slayers could easily dodge its attacks as long as they know how demon spider move. The demon spider was a powerful monster, but it was also predictable. It had a few tricks up its sleeve, but they were all easily countered. Its speed was its greatest weakness. It was simply too slow to keep up with agile, skilled slayers. Ked didn't want to interfere. She wanted to see how the Lion Fang party fought. She wanted to learn from them, to understand how they operated. Torin leapt into the air, his muscles rippling with strength. He landed on a branch above the demon spider, his sword held high. He channeled his mana into the blade, a faint glow surrounding it. He swung the sword down, creating a slash of mana that sliced into the back of the demon spider. At the same time, Lyra drew an arrow from her quiver. She channeled mana into the arrow, a pulsing energy surrounding it. She released the arrow, and it shot towards the demon spider, creating a small shock wave as it struck one of the monster's legs. The demon spider roared in pain, but it was still too stunned to react. Rhys, seizing the opportunity, jumped onto a branch above the demon spider's back. He spun his spear, channeling mana into the blade. He plunged the spear into the back of the demon spider, twirling it like a drill. Alara, with a quick movement of her hand, removed her enchantment from Torin and strengthened Rhys, giving him an extra boost of power. The demon spider, weakened and disoriented, lost its balance and tumbled to the ground, landing heavily on its feet. Ryan, seizing the moment, jumped into the air, his sword gleaming in the sunlight. He swung the sword, a powerful arc that sliced through the air. His blade met the demon spider's head, and with a final, gut-wrenching crunch, the monster's life was extinguished. "Well, that was easy," Ryan said, his voice a mix of amusement and relief. "Anyways, let's take the demon core from this monster." Demon cores were crystalline structures that were found inside the brains of demon-type monsters. They were valuable, because they could be used to strengthen mana stones. Mana stones were crystals that were used by magic users to store and channel mana. By purifying a demon core, they could infuse a mana stone with extra energy, increasing its power. Ked watched them as they approached the demon spider's body. She was impressed by how quickly they had dispatched the creature. This demon spider, while not an adult, was still powerful, strong enough to challenge Ryan in a one-on-one fight. But the Lion Fang party had worked together seamlessly, using their combined strength and skills to overwhelm the monster before it had a chance to mount a defense. Their teamwork was impressive. As they were examining the demon spider, a group of goblins suddenly jumped out of the bushes, their eyes fixed on Maple. The Lion Fang party, caught off guard, instinctively moved towards her. But before they could even reach her, the goblins were frozen midair, their movements abruptly halted. Ked had unsheathed her short sword, rotating it in her hand, and with a single, smooth motion, she sliced through the necks of the goblins, severing their heads. It was a breathtaking display of speed and precision. Well, she did say she could protect herself, Lyra said, her voice filled with surprise. But to think she was this strong all along, Ryan replayed, shaking his head in disbelief. And she didn't even do anything during the entire patrol. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. She was confident that she would be fine, even if there was a high-ranking monsters. Now I know why, he smiled, a newfound respect for the young girl growing within him. He had underestimated her, and he was glad to be proven wrong. This girl was truly strong. If you were that strong, why did you just stand there and watch? Torin asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and confusion. Maple shrugged. Well, to be fair, I did say I wanted to learn more about Slayers. And I didn't think I needed to interfere in that fight, anyway. With your aura alone, I could tell you guys had it in the bag. Oh, fair enough, Lyra said, a playful smile on her face. Anyways, Ryan, go get the demon core now. She said it jokingly, but her eyes twinkled with mischief. Huh, why me? Ryan asked, his voice laced with mock indignation. The rest of the party burst into laughter, the tension of the battle dissipating as quickly as it had arrived. Come on, Ryan, Alara said, a teasing grin on her face. You're the strongest one in the party. It's your job to do the dirty work. Ryan rolled his eyes, but he couldn't help but chuckle. Fine, fine, he said, as he walked towards the body of the demon spider and took the demon core of it. Alara carefully removed the right ear from one of the goblins that Maple had killed. She put it in a small leather pouch and handed it to her. I believe this is yours, she said, her voice a soft murmur. Maple stared at the pouch, her eyebrows slightly raised. Mine, she asked. Well, it was your kill after all. We can't take it, Alara said, her tone gentle but firm. And you wanted to learn more about Slayers, Torin added, his voice warm and inviting. Well, here's one thing about us. Your kill, your loot. Unless it's a team effort, then the loot is all yours. Maple took the pouch and hung it on her belt. They started to walk back to the village, the forest path leading them back to the warmth and comfort of civilization. As they walked, Ked couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. She had tagged along this party, these kind and welcoming individuals, only a few hours ago. But already, she felt a connection to them, a sense of belonging. The Lion Fang party walked into the tavern, the familiar scent of ale and wood smoke welcoming them. They were tired, but they were also hungry. The party ordered food, and they made sure to order something for Ked as well. She was still new to the village, and she didn't have any money. They were happy to treat her. While they were waiting for their food, the conversation turned to Ked. So, how was your first time experience with the Slayers, Maple? Torin asked. It was something, Ked said, a small smile playing on her lips. So, any plans of joining the Slayers? Ryan asked, a hint of encouragement in his voice. I mean, with your strength, you might become a high-ranking Slayer one day. I was actually thinking of joining, Ked said, her voice soft but firm. But I'm not fully decided yet. Is that so? Well, once you decide, just tell us. And we'll go straight to the Slayer's base and register you. Don't worry about the expenses. We'll pay for everything. Just pay us back when you have some money or something, Ryan said, his tone light and easy. Ked nodded. Ked was thinking about joining the Slayers. It would give her an advantage in the future, a way to learn more about this world, and a chance to hone her skills. She needed all the advantages she could get for her mission to save the world. She had already thought of a fake background story for herself to use, a way to explain her arrival in the village and her lack of knowledge of the outside world. The only thing she hadn't considered was a fake last name. She had been so focused on creating a believable story, she had forgotten that she needed a last name to go with her new identity. She had just thought of using her in-game name, Maple, yesterday, so she hadn't really had time to think about this matter before. She needed to figure something out, and soon. After a while, their food arrived. They ate, filling their stomachs with hearty stew and warm bread. They were all tired from the morning patrol, but they were ready to head back to the forest. So they left the tavern and walked back to the forest. They would patrol the area, keeping an eye out for any monsters that might threaten the peace of their village. The Lion Fang party, with Ked in tow, patrolled the forest, their eyes scanning the undergrowth for any sign of trouble. They encountered a few groups of goblins, but the goblins were no match for them. Ked even killed a few, collecting their right ears as proof of their deaths. Other than the goblins, nothing much happened. They were all starting to get bored. They decided to head back to the village early. They went to the Slayer's base, a large, stone building that stood at the heart of the village. Inside, the place buzzed with activity, slayers and adventurers going about their business. They sold the goblin ears they had collected, and then Ked turned to Ryan. "So, how do you join the slayers?" she asked, a smile lighting up her face. "So, you're joining the organization, Maple?" Ryan asked. Ked nodded. "All right, then. Hey, you heard her, miss. Don't worry, I'll pay for her registration." The receptionist, a woman with a stern expression and a sharp gaze, nodded. She pulled out a sheet of paper. "Please fill this out," she said, her voice curt but professional. Ked took the paper and went to a nearby table. She scanned the form. It was simple, asking for her name, age, sex, and job. Ked looked at the form, her eyes lingering on the line that asked for her full name. She glanced at the Lion Fang party, a question in her eyes. "Do I have to put my full name in this?" she asked. "Yeah, you have to," Torin replied, his voice firm. Ked sighed. She knew it was a necessary step. She placed her shield on the table, its surface gleaming in the dim light of the Slayer's base. As she looked at her shield, a thought came to her. She smiled, a determined look on her face. She picked up the pen and wrote her name on the form. Maple Monrose. Name, Maple Monrose. Age, 18. Sex, female. Job, warrior. She handed the form to the receptionist, who took it with a nod. "Please follow me to go and measure your strength and magic capacity," she said. She turned and walked towards a door at the back of the room. Ked followed, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She was finally taking the first step toward becoming a slayer. The Lion Fang party stayed behind, their eyes watching her with warmth and support. The receptionist led Ked into a small, empty room. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, sat a glowing crystal. "Please place your hand on the magic crystal to measure your mana," the receptionist said. Ked stepped forward and placed her hand on the crystal. The crystal immediately began to glow, brightening with an almost blinding intensity. The light was so strong, it was hard to look at. The receptionist stared at the crystal, her mouth slightly agape. That's too much mana," she stammered, her voice filled with disbelief. After a moment, she regained her composure. She led Ked to another room. In the center of this room, was a large, pulsating object that resembled a punching bag. "This is a slime bag," the receptionist explained. "As slimes are immune to any physical attack, we use them to measure a person's strength. So please attack it with anything physical. You may use your weapon if you want, or even use aura, if you can use it, that is." She stepped back, her eyes fixed on Ked with a curious expression. Auras were essentially enchantments that could be applied to all kinds of attacks, both physical and magical. They were a powerful way to boost the strength and effectiveness of an attack. The moment a person released an aura, they were essentially using a personal enchantment. But using an aura could drain a person's mana quickly, which is why enchantment magic was a more reliable way to boost an attack. Enchantment magic was a weaker version of aura, but it drained mana more slowly, so it could be used for a longer period of time. Plus, you could still use aura while someone was using enchantment magic. In essence, it was a layering system. Enchantment magic could be used to create effects equivalent to the first layer of aura, all the way to the fourth layer of aura. Auras were powerful ability, but they required skill and knowledge to use effectively. Ked nodded. She took a fighting stance, her feet firmly planted, her body tense with anticipation. She channeled her mana, and a purple energy began to flow around her. The Lion Fang party, who were still waiting in the reception hall, could feel the energy, a wave of power that seemed to radiate from her very being. Even the other people in the village could feel it, a sudden shift in the air, a sense of something powerful at work. Ked compressed all that energy into her fist. She raised her fist and punched the slime bag. The punch was a blur of motion, a flash of purple energy. The slime bag, which was designed to withstand any physical attacks, simply burst apart. The force of Ked's punch was simply too much for it to handle. The receptionist was speechless. Not only had Ked destroyed the slime bag with a single punch, but the aura she had released was incredible. It was dense, powerful, and at least at the 5th layer. Ryan, an A-rank slayer, could only use the 5th layer of aura. He can only activate it but cannot use it in battle. This was incredibly impressive. Auras were extremely difficult to use and maintain. You needed a massive amount of mana to use them effectively. But you also had to have incredible mental and physical strength. The power boost from auras was intense, and if you weren't careful, you could easily be overwhelmed by it. Even Ryan was careful when he used the full power of his aura. He would only use it if absolutely necessary. And he usually used only the second or third layer of his aura, to avoid overtaxing himself. But here was this young girl, using aura effortlessly, as if it was a simple extension of herself. There were 10 layers of aura, each increasing the user's strength exponentially. The higher the layer, the more powerful the multiplier. First layer, 2x multiplier. Second layer, 5x multiplier to the previous layer. Third layer, 7x multiplier to the previous layer. Fourth layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. Fifth layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. Sixth layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. Seventh layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. Eighth layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. Ninth layer, 10x multiplier to the previous layer. 10th layer, 20x multiplier to the previous layer. Auras were a natural ability that all living beings in this world possessed, but only those with a huge amount of mana could actually use them. Having strong mental and physical strength was useless without enough mana to support the aura's drain. Of course, there was a way to overcome the mana drain. You need to understand the flow of mana inside your body and learn to control it. By mastering this skill, you could learn to maintain a certain layer of aura, even when you weren't actively releasing it. These layers would essentially become your base. But only a few humans could do this. Ryan could do this, but only to the first layer. This ability was one of the requirements to rank up to B rank. Satoran and Reese were also capable of it. That's why it was so difficult to reach B rank. You needed more than just raw power. You needed to understand your mana, to control it, to make it work for you. There were also monsters that naturally had this ability. A demon spider, for example, naturally accessed the first layer of aura. And even a goblin king could also have it. After Ked's strength and mana tests, the Lion Fang party went out to meet her. Their expressions were still a little dazed, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They hadn't seen what had happened in the test room, but the energy that had radiated from the test room was incredible. They couldn't help but think that this young girl was terrifyingly strong. She was out of their league. The aura they had felt was at least at the 5th layer, and even Ryan, an A-rank slayer, couldn't use the 5th layer of aura casually. One step, one move, and his mana reserves would be drained dry. It was incredibly taxing, so he was both envious of Ked and relieved that she had such power. Being a slayer was a dangerous job. If you weren't strong enough, you could easily end up in an early grave. The world was full of monsters, and they weren't afraid to attack. You needed to be prepared, to be strong, to be ready to fight. Ryan was glad that Ked had the power to protect herself. The receptionist, still slightly overwhelmed by Maple's impressive display of power, told them that the results of the tests and Maple Slayer's license would be ready the following day. They all knew that the results would be favorable. Ked had clearly proven herself to be more than capable of becoming a slayer. They all nodded, their eyes fixed on Ked with a mixture of admiration and respect. With that, Maple and the Lion Fang party left the Slayer's base, their steps light with anticipation. They had a lot to look forward to. Maple was a Slayer now, and she was ready to begin her journey in this new world. Meanwhile that was happening, a man stood in a space of absolute nothingness. It was a place where space and time seemed to be undefined, an empty void where the rules of the world didn't seem to apply. He was bathed in a bright white light, a glow that emanated from within him. He looked down at the world below. He could see Ked, a small figure standing amongst the members of the Lion Fang party. She was so small, so insignificant, yet she was at the center of this vast and complicated world. He smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of his lips. "Good, very good, everything is playing up nicely," he murmured, his voice a soft whisper that seemed to echo across the void. He felt a presence behind him, a familiar sensation that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned around, his eyes meeting the gaze of another figure. "What a pleasant surprise," the man said. "Never thought you would actually go here in the lower dimension." "I'm much more surprised that you actually went to a lower dimension," the person said. Her voice was a whisper, yet it seemed to reverberate across the void. "It's not like you do this kind of thing normally. So, what have you been up to?" The light man chuckled, a low, melodious sound. It has nothing to do with you, cosmic goddess. Just mind your own business, he said. And you already have plenty of things that entertain you, so just go and focus on those. I suppose that's true, the cosmic goddess replied, her voice laced with amusement. But unlike you, I don't block my source of entertainment by making a barrier that blocks omniscient and omnipresent beings' sights, so any gods and cosmic beings wouldn't see it. And you think I wouldn't know? Tish, how in the world did you even find out about that? The light man said, and what is it to you? It's not like I'm the only one who is doing this. Yes, but this is out of character for you to do this, don't you think? The cosmic goddess said, I get that we all are bored, that's why we create reality avatars and leave the true reality for entertainment, but we never change character. So really, what's going on? She paused, a knowing look in her eyes. You didn't happen to kill someone in your little experiments, have you? Why would you think that? The light man asked calmly. His mind, however, was screaming. He had gone to great lengths to hide his little experiment, but the cosmic goddess seemed to know everything. Just a feeling, she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Well, anyways, let me see what this new entertainment you've been hiding from us. She reached out with her power, and with a wave of her hand, she bypassed the barrier that the light man had created. Oh, I see, so, this is what you've been up to. An abnormal gamer, an innocent child facing an emperor who has enough power to destroy a bubble. The light man sighed. Correction, he still can't destroy a bubble at the moment. He still needs to encounter void energy to be fully able to use the power of the power stone to its fullest. And the chances of him harnessing void energy are extremely slim. Still, the cosmic goddess said, her voice laced with amusement, have you ever thought what would happen if the emperor managed to harness void energy? How would your little hero deal with him? She could see through the barrier that the light man had created, but her omniscient and omnipresent abilities couldn't pass through it. Of course, you don't need to worry about it, the light man replied. Now that you can see through the barrier, just enjoy the show. He chuckled, a low, warm sound that echoed across the void. He knew that the cosmic goddess would be fascinated by this show. The emperor awoke in his grand chamber, a vast room adorned with luxurious fabrics and intricate carvings. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He stood and walked to the window, his gaze sweeping across the sprawling landscape below. He could see his soldiers, tens of thousands of them, standing in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. They were his loyal servants, his instruments of war. He was their emperor, and they were his to command. He turned away from the window and strode to his throne room, a vast hall that was dominated by his magnificent throne. The throne was made of polished ebony and inlaid with gold and silver, its back adorned with the symbol of the empire. He sat upon the throne, his tall, imposing figure filling the seat. A moment later, an old man entered the room. He bowed low, his forehead touching the floor. Your liege, the old man said, his voice a trembling whisper. I have the report from this month's taxes and the rebels. The emperor raised a hand, his voice deep and commanding. Go on. The old man, his face pale with fear, began to speak. Just the sound of the emperor's voice sent shivers down his spine. He could feel sweat trickling down his face. We have 8% more than usual, but, the old man said, his voice trailing off. He knew that he was about to deliver bad news, and he could feel the emperor's gaze burning into him. But, the emperor said, his voice a low growl that sent shivers down the old man's spine. But one village fought back and killed some of our tax collectors and some of our soldiers, the man said, sweat forming on his brow. The room grew colder, and a dark aura emanated from the emperor. The knights standing beside him couldn't withstand the sudden wave of power and collapsed to the floor, lifeless. What? Some small village fought back and defied my authority. The emperor's voice was a thunderous roar, his rage palpable. Which village is this? The village of Hurry, sire, the old man said, his voice barely a whisper. He knew that he had just sealed the village's fate. The emperor looked at him, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Go send 150 soldiers there. I'm giving them free authority to do whatever they want to the people in that village. I want that village gone at the end of the day. Show them the consequences if they defy me. His voice was a death knell, a promise of destruction. As you wish, my lord, the old man said, his voice trembling slightly. He knew that he had to obey the emperor, but he couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the people of Hurry. The emperor nodded and turned his attention to the rebels. What about the rebels? He asked. We are still searching for their main base, my lord, the old man said. But we did take down 5 more bases of theirs this week. What's taken so long to beat those weak little rebels? You know what, get out of here, or else you know what will happen. The emperor's voice was a cold, hard command. The old man, his face pale and his knees shaking, bowed low and scurried out of the throne room. He didn't dare linger, not with the emperor's aura still heavy in the air. The emperor watched the old man leave, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't care about the rebels, or the people of Hurry, or anyone else who dared to defy him. His only goal was to maintain his power, to expand his empire, to rule the world. Meanwhile, over 100 soldiers were assembled in the courtyard. They were a grim and menacing sight, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. They marched out of the castle, their boots thudding against the cobblestone streets, their swords gleaming in the sun. They headed toward the village of Hurry. They arrived at Hurry just before nightfall. The village was a scene of utter devastation. The buildings were reduced to ashes. The people who haven't been killed were being rounded up, chained together, and loaded into wagons. They would become slaves, forced to serve the emperor and his empire. The leader of the rebellion slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing through the dimly lit room. He was in a small, unassuming room, surrounded by maps and charts. It was their temporary headquarters, a place where they strategized and planned their rebellion against the oppressive empire. Damn that empire, he growled, his voice laced with frustration. They took down 5 of our bases this week. He stared at the map spread out before him, dotted with red pins marking their lost outposts. Rick, his second in command, placed a hand on his shoulder. Leader, please calm down, he said, his voice soothing. If you lose your composure now, it will make our remaining men lose hope. Please calm down for now. The leader took a deep breath and nodded. You're right, Rick, arigato, he said, trying to regain his composure. He was a strong leader, but even he had his moments of weakness. How many men do we have left? We have only around 3,000 men left, leader, Rick replied, his face grim. The leader sighed, running a hand through his hair. I see, not much left, he said, a somber tone creeping into his voice. Go find more men that would be willing to join us and train them until they manage to use the second layer of aura. We need to strengthen our forces. And order our men to keep a low profile for now. Rick nodded solemnly. As you wish, leader, he said, and left the room to carry out his orders. The leader watched him go, a heavy weight of responsibility settling in his chest. The empire was a formidable foe, and they were outnumbered and outgunned. But he had to stay strong, for the sake of the people he was fighting for, and for the hope of a better future. Chance scene, Ked sat on the edge of her bed, her slayer's license clutched in her hand. It had taken a little longer than expected to arrive. They thought it would be here this morning, but it had arrived late in the evening. Apparently, there had been some minor issue at the Slayer's base that had been resolved, but it had delayed the delivery of her license. She flipped the card over, examining the intricate lettering and the official Slayer emblem stamped in the corner. It was a little strange, but she was happy she had finally gotten it. She was a Slayer now, officially. Aside from that, nothing much had happened for Ked today. She had spent most of the day trying to learn more about this world. She hadn't gone with the Lion Fang party on their patrol of the forest today because she had been waiting for her license to come through. But she hadn't really found anything useful. Everything she had discovered was what she had expected from a world like this. There was slavery, for instance, and it wasn't a secret. It was just a part of the world. She had decided to go back to the Lion Fang party's house and rest. The cosmic goddess chuckled, leaning back in her non-existent chair. The void around her shimmered, a kaleidoscope of colors and light, a reflection of the vastness of her power. She looked down to the lower world, specifically the world where the light man put Maple. You know, I'm kinda enjoying this story, she said, her voice laced with amusement. It's interesting. Never thought you'd be able to come up with this kind of entertainment, and even tried to have it all for yourself. I'm glad I found out about this. The light man, who was sitting next to her, rolled his non-existent eyes. Yeah, whatever, he mumbled, but a hint of a smile played on his lips. He couldn't deny it, even he was enjoying the show. He was starting to admit, though, that the cosmic goddess had a point. It was quite entertaining to see an ordinary gamer, who used to not have any special powers or abilities, thrust into a world filled with magic and power, and given the task by him to defeat an extremely powerful emperor. "I'm surprised you haven't gone ahead and interfered any farther yet," the cosmic goddess said. "I'm not saying I think you should, as currently, she is still managing, but I'm surprised." He shrugged, leaning forward and watching the screen intently. "Maybe I will," he said with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "But I think I'll wait until things get a little more interesting." Back in the world, the leader of the rebellion, a man with a tired face and eyes, sighed. The loss of 5 bases and hundreds of men had taken a toll on him. He needed to regain his focus. He felt overwhelmed, his mind a whirlwind of anxieties. He decided to head for the forest. It had always been a place of solace for him, a refuge where he could escape the constant stress of the rebellion. He needed to clear his head, get away from the tense atmosphere of the rebel base, and vent some of his frustrations. The forest was a dark and mysterious place, full of towering trees and dense undergrowth. He could hear the sounds of birds chirping, and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. He walked deeper into the forest, his mind slowly calming. He spotted an adult demon spider in the distance, its legs skittering across the forest floor. A few smaller spiders, its offspring, scurried around it. The leader took out his sword, its silver blade catching the dim light of the forest. He had been using the first layer of his aura most of the time, as he can naturally use up to the 3rd layer. He could probably take down these spiders with just the first layer, but he was feeling restless. He needed to let loose a bit more. He activated the 2nd layer of aura, and his sword seemed to shimmer with an inner energy. He felt a surge of strength coursing through him, and a sense of calm settled over him. He was ready to fight. The leader charged towards the demon spiders, a blur of motion through the trees. He was used to facing much larger, more powerful creatures, but these spiders were still a threat. The smaller spiders had no chance against his speed. He moved like a whirlwind, his sword a silver blur as he cut them down one by one. In a matter of seconds, the little ones were gone, leaving only the adult spider, its 8 eyes glittering with fury. The demon spider lunged, firing off strands of webbing. They weren't just ordinary webs, they were as hard as steel, and they shot towards him with surprising speed. The leader moved aside, his body a blur of motion, as the strands whipped past him. He had to admit, the spider was fast. He charged forward again, and in a single, swift stroke, severed one of the spider's legs. The creature screeched, its pain evident in the way it thrashed and spun, sending more webs hurtling his way. The leader smirked. He knew he was better than this creature, but he was enjoying the fight. He felt the familiar rush of power as he activated his aura, his sword glowing with a faint energy. He slashed through the air, intercepting the webbing, severing it with practiced ease. He continued to move forward, weaving around the spider's attacks, getting closer and closer. He had to admit, he was enjoying himself. This was the kind of battle he needed, a way to let out the frustration and tension that had built up inside him. He was just a few feet away now. In one final, decisive move, he lunged, his sword singing through the air. He cut down on the demon spider's head, and with a final shriek, the creature collapsed. The leader stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath and letting the adrenaline fade. It was over, but he knew the fight was far from over. He had to keep going. He had to do everything he could to protect his people, to fight against the tyranny of the emperor. Rick, ever the dutiful second in command, found the leader standing by the edge of the forest, his sword still sheathed, his face calm but etched with a weariness that belied his outward composure. He had been expecting to find him back at the rebel base. "Done cooling off yet?" Rick asked, his voice carrying a gentle concern. He was worried about the leader. The recent losses had taken a toll on him. The leader nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "A bit," he said, turning to face his right-hand man. "What are you doing here?" "Nothing, just passing by," Rick said, a hint of teasing in his voice. "And I saw you taking your frustrations out on those demon spiders. Anyways, need some help taking all the demon cores of those spiders, leader?" The leader nodded again. He wasn't really looking forward to the task. He would rather spend his time strategizing for their next move, but it was important to make sure they didn't waste any potential resources. Rick gave a signal, and the men behind him, who had been patiently waiting just beyond the trees, moved forward. They carefully collected the demon cores from the slain spiders. The leader and Rick started walking back toward the base, the forest dimming behind them. They would need to go over their plans, find more recruits, and determine their next move. He didn't have much hope for the future, but he had to keep going, for the sake of his people. Meanwhile, in the village of Furch, Ked was doing her usual routine, joining the Lion Fang on their patrol. She had earned a small bit of money, just a few copper coins, for her efforts. Not much, but enough to buy a few trinkets or a snack from one of the village vendors. Ked liked to explore on her own sometimes. The forest was a vast and wild place, full of hidden paths and secret trails. She'd wander the forest, keeping an eye out for any monsters, like goblins or low wolves. She was pretty good at hunting them, and she'd keep the parts of the monsters that she could sell. She had put all the monster parts into her subspace, so she always had enough room for the skins and furs of any low wolves she hunted. She was pretty good at skinning them with her butcher skill, too. She had also buried the bandits she had killed on her way to the village. The Lion Fang party, who had invited her to join them, had been a bit surprised by her independent nature, but they'd respected her decision to decline their offer. She had told them she wanted to learn more about the world and about being a slayer before she left the village to do her own thing. She knew she needed to be strong, to be resourceful, to be able to survive on her own. So, for now, she was still going on patrols with them, learning as much as she could from them. And, of course, she would still need to kill her own monsters and sell their parts. The Lion Fang party let her stay at their house for free, as they thought she might need to save up some money for her adventure once she left. She was grateful for their kindness. They are now fighting against some low wolves and goblins. Well, it was more like a slaughter than a battle. The Lion Fang, with their combined strength and skill, quickly overwhelmed the creatures. Ked, too, had joined in, taking down a few goblins and a low wolf, just so she would have something to sell at the Slayer base. Once the fight was over, Ked gathered the slain creatures. She began to skin the wolf, her fingers moving with practice ease. Her butcher skill allowed her to quickly and efficiently remove the hide from the wolf's body. She also took the goblin ears, which were also a saleable item. Torin and Lyra, the only two in the Lion Fang party who knew how to properly skin monsters, were watching Ked, their jaws slack. They had never seen her skin a wolf before. They hadn't even realized she was that skilled. They didn't see her sell wolf skins at the Slayer base, that's why they didn't know that she actually knew how to skin monsters. Ked moved so quickly and effortlessly, her knife a blur of motion. She was even more efficient than Torin and Lyra. Once Ked had finished, the Lion Fang still had a few wolves to skin. She went over to them and said, "Need some help?" Torin and Lyra looked at her, their eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Torin shook his head, a smile on his face. "No need, we got this. Just rest for now." Ked nodded, and went over to Ryan, Reese, and Alara, who were relaxing in a nearby tree. They weren't really skilled at skinning monsters and had learned it was best to let the more experienced members of the party handle it. Besides, if they messed up, they'd get paid less. "Done skinning your wolves, Maple?" Ryan asked, looking over at Maple, who was sitting with Alara, a mischievous glint in her eye. He had been watching her work, and he was impressed. Maple nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yep, all done." She had been surprisingly efficient, even more so than Torin and Lyra. "Well then, good," Ryan said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Never thought you knew how to skin. Did you learn that in the forest you came from?" "Yeah, I did," Maple said. "There are a lot of monsters there, and we used some of their hides to make clothes." It wasn't a complete lie. She did skin monsters sometimes in her free time when she was training in that forest. "Is that so?" Reese asked, his voice full of curiosity. "No wonder you're so skilled at it. You probably did it a lot back then, right?" Maple nodded, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. She had never really thought about how much time she had spent skinning monsters during her free time in the forest. She just did it to pass time after all. After a while, Torin and Lyra finished skinning their wolves, packing the hides into a magic bag. Maple, on the other hand, placed her wolf skin in her subspace storage. "How do you do that?" Ryan asked, watching in wonder as Maple wolf's skin and goblin ears just vanished. Maple shrugged, her eyes twinkling. "It's one of my skills." She wasn't going to explain it. There was a certain pleasure in keeping some things to herself. The Lion Fang didn't really question any further. The group packed up their gear and began to head back to the village. They had had a productive day, and they were all looking forward to a good meal once they are back in the village. Somewhere in a city a girl is walking in the streets, apparently she was going out to the forest. She was wearing hooded clothes that have 2 daggers hidden on the back. Once she got out the city she sprinted to the forest with a blinded speed and blue aura around her. After a while she reached the middle of the forest and meet some guys in there. "Any luck?" one of the men said. She shakes her head, and said, "No," before she took off a magic bag on her waist. "Here's some food, you guys might need some," she said before tossing it to the man. Yeah, arigato," he said and opened it and saw some supplies that could last a week or 2. The girl spoke, "Heard about the rebels?" The guy then replied, "Which one? Nowadays there are too many rebellion." "I think it was the Yuasa's rebels," the girl said. "I see, what about them?" The guy said, which the girl said, "They lost 5 bases and around 2,000 men last week," she said. "I see, well if that continues they won't last long. Anyways you should head back to the city and continue your job and forget to bring some monster parts before entering or the guards might get suspicions of you," the man said. Yeah, I know, I'll be back next week or once I find something," the girl said, and blue aura surrounded her and she vanished. The man sighed. "That girl," he said, and he went back of what he was doing. Let's have a little time skip. It had been a month since Maple had arrived in the village, and she already had quite a bit of savings. She had been working hard, going on patrols with the Lion Fang and hunting monsters in the forest. She had learned a lot about this world, and she was starting to feel more confident in her abilities, not like she wasn't in the first place. The Lion Fang had also told her to separate the money she would give to the tax collector once they arrived in the village, and Maple agreed. She really didn't like the idea of it, but because it would be troublesome and too early to act against the emperor at the moment, she just did as she was told. She knew that she needed to be careful, to avoid making enemies until she was stronger. Once the tax collector got to the village, they all handed over their taxes, and the collectors left the village. Maple watched them leave, her eyes narrowed. She saw how much the villagers looked at the collectors when they were collecting taxes. It was like the villagers had a mixture of fear and not having a choice. She swore that one day she would defeat that damn emperor, no matter what. But for now, she was too weak. Yes, she was stronger than the average person her age because she could access up to 6 layers of aura and could naturally activate 3 layers. She managed to achieve this because of her system, but she knew that even if she could activate that many layers of aura, if her base state was still weak, then the aura was pretty useless. She would probably lose to Ryan or Torin if they fought without aura, so she had to get stronger and gain more experience. She knew that currently, her power and strength weren't enough to defeat that emperor. She had to train harder, to learn more, to be able to achieve her mission. Right now, Maple was in an open field somewhere in the forest with Torin. She had asked him to help her with her combat skills by sparring. She didn't ask Ryan for this because he was quite busy at the moment with something, and Torin was the only other swordsman in the village. When it came to sword skills, he and Ryan were pretty much equal, anyway. It's just that Ryan was stronger than him. Both of them looked at each other, and Torin asked, "So, are you fighting with that short sword of yours?" Maple replied with a shake of her head. "No," she said, looking at him with a serious look. "You'll be the first one to see this." Torin was confused about what she was saying. He looked at Maple, who had both her shield and short sword in her hands. As he was about to ask what she was talking about, both of her weapons glowed a bit and started to merge. He was shocked. He had never seen anything like it before. Once the glow ended, a sword was formed. This sword wasn't like any other sword. Once she unsheathed it, he could see that it was only a single-edged blade. He had never seen a sword like this before. He saw Maple in a battle stance. "Are you just going to admire my sword, or are we going to start?" she asked, her voice full of confidence. Torin shook off his thoughts, unsheathed his own sword, and took a battle stance. "You're right," he said. "But after this, I have some questions about that sword of yours." Maple nodded. She was ready to spar. They both charged at each other, their swords clashing in a flurry of motion. Torin watched Maple closely, analyzing her movements. He could see some mistakes in her stance and footwork, and he started to give her advice. He had to help her improve her technique. While he was advising her, he observed the blade and could see that it wasn't meant for strength but more like for fast movements. With each clash, he could clearly see that the sword wasn't that heavy. He figured out how to help her with her swordsmanship. He needed to improve her footwork and arm movements. He delivered another swing of his sword, which Maple blocked. She sidestepped to the left, rotated, and swung her sword. This increased the force of her swing. But, of course, Torin was still able to block this with ease. They continued to clash swords for quite some time, and with the last clash, Torin smiled. "I think that's it for now," he said, and Maple nodded. They both sheathed their swords back into their scabbards. Torin looked at Maple with a smile. "Maple, I admit, you're strong," he said. He then added, "but you need to work on your swordsmanship. Because I could have killed you 5 times in the first minutes of the fight if we were enemies," Maple smiled. "Yeah, I figured," she said. "That's why I asked you to spar with me. I mean, I could only ask you and Ryan-san for this because you're the only swordsman I know. And since Ryan-san is quite busy right now, I asked you," Torin nodded. Torin knew that Maple was strong, and she could probably go toe-to-toe with Ryan in a fight if they used aura, but without using aura, she wasn't weak, but she wasn't really that strong. Anyone with proper training could probably beat her in a fight with no aura, not all, but still. Her swordsmanship was quite sloppy, but at least she could use a sword. He can easily see that she has a lot of potential. In the past few hours, Torin had been training Maple in swordsmanship. She could already swing a sword easily, so he knew that she had used a sword a lot of times in the past. He just needed to teach her how to swing it properly. He also gave her a routine to do, mostly for her arm movements and footwork. Based on what he had seen, her sword wasn't meant for strength but for fast and precise cuts. So, he would have to train her mostly for fast movements. Her strength wasn't a problem. Besides being short, her physical strength was no laughing matter. For her age, her physical attributes were like someone in their 30s and above. And if she improved her skills, she would be someone formidable. To be honest, the only reason Torin was able to beat Maple in their spar was because her swordsmanship was quite sloppy. That's it, Maple's strength was actually superior to his. She just had to work on her skills, and she would be able to beat him in a pure swordsmanship fight, not using power or aura, just swordsmanship and base strength. But for now, she would have to train to reach that level of skill. Torin knew that Maple had potential. She was strong, she was fast, and she was eager to learn. He was confident that she would become a great slayer. They had already trained for a couple of hours, and the progress was actually quite noticeable. Maple was easy to teach, but during their training, she would sometimes do something else, accidentally, of course. But for some reason, it actually worked for her. Torin realized that Maple's endurance and durability were pretty high. He realized this because he started to use a stick infused with a bit of mana, so it wouldn't break easily, to hit her head when she made a mistake. Yeah, he was being a bit strict. But when he hit her with it, she wouldn't flinch at all. He used to train some people before, and even though those people were trained individuals, they would still at least feel the hit when he hit them with the stick infused with mana. But Maple didn't even react, even a little bit. So, he just started to use the stick to correct her posture or to get her attention. He had to admit, he was a little impressed. After a while, Torin said, "I guess that's enough for now. So, let's head back to the village and get some rest." "Maple, you deserve it," Maple replied with a smile. "Arigato Torin-san," she said. Then, both of them left and went back to the village. Maple was tired, but she was also satisfied with her training. Maple had learned a lot, and Torin had been impressed with her progress. He was looking forward to seeing how far she would go. When they reached the village and got home, they saw Ryan, Lyra, and Reese drinking tea. Once they saw Maple and Torin, they greeted them both. Ryan then asked, "Where have you guys been? And Maple, why do you look like you fell from a high place?" Torin replied, "I was training her." The three of them were shocked. Reese, who had just taken a sip of his tea, spat it out in shock. They looked at Maple, and they saw that she wasn't injured, just a bit dirty and tired. They sighed in relief. "What's with those faces?" Torin asked. "Well, you're known as the demon teacher of the swords by everyone you've trained," Rill said. "So, we're kinda surprised that Maple isn't even a bit injured. Not like we were hoping she was, we're relieved, but still." Ryan added, "Some don't even last an hour from their first day of training with you, and they're already crying to leave." And then Lyra added, "Yeah, Torin, you're pretty strict and harsh every time you teach. You don't hold back at all. You hit them with a mana-infused stick once they made a bit of mistake." Torin rolled his eyes. "At least those who I trained are now high-ranking slayers." Well, they couldn't argue with that. Most of Torin's students were at least C rank level once they graduated from his training. So, they were pretty strong. They knew that his methods worked, even though they were tough. Maple was about to go to her room, but Torin stopped her by grabbing her shoulder. I think we still need to talk about that sword of yours, Maple. You think I forgot? Maple looked at him and started to sweat a bit. To be honest, she didn't think he forgot, but the thing was, she was the one who forgot about it. The others were confused because Maple had a short sword, but they didn't know what was so special about it. She already diffused it when they were walking back to the village, and her weapon turned back into a short sword and shield. Maple then fused her short sword and shield again and turned it into a katana. Ryan, Reese, and Lyra were shocked about this. They inspected the sword, and Maple unsheathed it. The three of them were even more surprised because they had never seen a sword that only had a single edge. Then, Maple explained, "This is my sword. Unlike those swords you guys are used to, this only has one edge. These swords are also generally lighter and more focused on fast, precise cuts compared to the heavy swords you guys are used to." She said this, which impressed them. Ryan, being curious, extended his hand. Maple, knowing his intention, handed her katana to him. He took a good look at it. As a swordsman, he was impressed by it. He wasn't only impressed with its look, but he could easily see that it wasn't lacking in durability or sharpness. It was even sharper than his own sword and as durable as his sword as well. It was a fine sword, though it wasn't really his type of sword that he would use in battle himself. But, as a swordsman, he admired fine swords. Once they were all done admiring the sword, Ryan handed it back to Maple, and she diffused it, turning it back into a short sword and shield. Once again, Maple was about to head to her room when the door opened, and they saw Alara walk in with a book in hand. She saw that everyone was there, and she said hi to them with a smile. They all returned the greeting. Alara then looked at Maple and asked, "Why do you look like you fell from a high place?" Maple just replied, "Do I really look like I fell from a high place?" She asked this because Ryan had asked the same thing earlier when she and Torin had just arrived. "Well, yes you do," Ryan said. He then added, "But, anyway, she was training with Torin." Alara looked at Maple up and down, and she was shocked. "But that's not possible," she said. "She isn't injured. How can someone train with the demon teacher of the sword without injuries on the first day?" Ryan just laughed. "I guess there's a first time for everything." Everyone laughed about it, except Torin, who was quite annoyed by this. He didn't really like that nickname his students back then gave him. And after a while, they all went back to what they were doing and then headed to bed. That's how their day ended. That's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed this kind of what if scenario, please leave a comment. I'll read every single one. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a new video. If you want to submit your own fanfic story to be featured on the channel, let me know. That's all for now. Goodbye.